I never thought about being in television, but what I did focus on was the subject matter. And, my 10,000 hours came in learning baseball, the intricacies of baseball, studying, body language, body movement, pitcher movement, and all the little things about the game that I love so much. And I think when you dominate a language or when you dominate a subject matter, then whether you're Warren Buffett trying to explain the S&P 500 and what's happening, it always sounds like Warren, to me, he never loses you. And I try to, take something that I understand really, really well at the core and convey it in a manner that's simple and digestible. One of the things I think about is, having Natasha and Ella, who are, 12 and 8. And by the way, let me just spend 2 minutes on my daughters because it is my favorite subject. Natasha, they say she looks like me and she's a lot like me. So she's A personality, type A. And she's already planned her, next 50 years. She's already decided she goes to Ransom Everglades, which is like our little Yale, Harvard in Miami, little private school. She's in 6th grade. She's going to Princeton for undergrad. Like she's going to Harvard for graduate school, and then she's getting her PhD at Harvard. At Stanford. Ella, on the other hand, is completely different. She can care less where she goes to college. She wants to go to school with her mother went, which was Ohio State. And what she really wants to do is, I have a company called A-Rod Corp, and she comes over every day and literally gets a paper and blocks the A and puts E-Rod for Ella, E-Rod Corp. And she can't wait to take over as the next CEO. And she said, Dad, I'm going to make 2 big changes the minute I take over. Number 1, I'm going to fire you. And number 2, I'm going to paint this whole office, instead of white, is going to be hot pink. So she knows where she's going. I talk a lot to business schools, and I tell them, athletes, there's this statistic where 70% of athletes are either bankrupt and divorced within 2 years of retirement. And if you think about kind of the tools, the assets that athletes have, they're great workers, they're routines, they know how to follow a blueprint, they're tough, they're relentless. So if you mix that with a really, really smart business person and you merge them together, you have basically a business right there day one. Life is about storytelling, and if you don't tell your story, nobody will do for you as you'll do for yourself. So what I would say is, how do you differentiate yourself when you walk into a clubhouse in the New York Yankees and you have Derek Jeter on one side and A-Rod on another and Mariano Rivera and Andy Pettitte, and maybe it's by the way you present yourself, maybe it's by the way you dress, maybe it's by the way you approach someone, and there's a kind of a cadence to yourself that you can develop that will basically start building your brand. In live television, I'm wrong all the time. I mean, I'm wrong on air and off air, both. When you do live television and you're doing postseason baseball, you're doing the World Series, I mean, we had 42 million people watch us in Game 7. That was pretty scary. And it was a phenomenal series for baseball. And, if you're wrong, there's nothing wrong with coming back and saying, yesterday I mentioned that, Hendricks had 14 home runs. It was actually 16. And one more interesting thing, he's only struck out once in the last 8 games, which, by the way, is phenomenal, right? And you can correct it, and there's a bank shot to that. And I think the audience at home has credibility. And then, remember, your audience you have 25 players listening, coaches and managers, to everything you're saying. So your audience is really wide. And I think sometimes people get really singular and, again, myopic and say, I want to talk to my editor, I want to talk to the fans. You got to talk to everyone because everyone is part of your business. I have this thing in my head that when I try to be clever and I try to be smooth and when I try to, you sound like you're full of crap, and people have their radars are on all the time, and people are like, I know people like you, you're not going to BS me, and you piss people off. And when I came back from suspension, I'm like, I'm silly, I'm dumb, I'm 5th in strikeouts, I've had some good, and people are like, oh my God, who is that guy? I actually like him. And I think that's what Fox did to me, because I think ultimately it's obvious that I love the game of baseball. It's obvious that I have my 10,000 hours and I've studied it to no end. That's an incredible bond with people because people do love baseball. Baseball is America's game, no matter what the other stats say. And I think someday we'll come back to number 1 because we do have an opening, but that's a separate subject. I signed the 2 biggest contracts in Major League Baseball history. And I was polarizing. And I came to New York, and there was a shortstop already there. And then I moved to third base. So I think a lot of times the fans had to decide, do I like our guy or do I like Darth Vader? Well, that was an easy decision for most. But what happened was I gave them too much, I put too much gasoline, and as a result, they used it against me. So I blame myself more than I blame them. And the irony is, again, full circle, is when I returned after my suspension and I changed. I changed, and they saw a different person. I put out a different energy. I was more respectful. I was more centered, and there was an appreciation about everything that I did. I thought ever since I came back, the media's been incredible with me, and I'm, knock on wood. So ultimately, you have to look in the mirror and be accountable, and it's on you.